So welcome to Untangle, where we're untangling Christianity from theology, religion, and colonization. And in this episode, we wanted to do something different. We're tackling a really complex topic, so we wanted to do it in a long-form content. But before we do that, I wanted to make sure it was clear. In this video, we are not criticizing anybody's Christianity. We're not saying that anybody has done anything wrong. We're saying we think there's a different way to look at our Christian walk, to look at our Christian faith. And if we shift our frame to be able to see Jesus, see Christianity, and see the Bible that way, we believe that it will lead you to have a much freer walk with Jesus. And that's what we want for you. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy. Well, welcome to Untangled, where we untangle Christianity from theology, religion, and colonization. And today we're doing something different. We're going to do a live Untangled, and I brought in one of my friends and a person who really helps me work through a lot of the Untangled concepts and ideas. Mr. Lawrence Wills is joining me today. And so what I want to do is just kind of share with him one of the new Untangled thoughts and approaches that I'm having. And Mr. Lawrence does a great job of just helping poke holes in things and helping the dialogue develop. And so he is a self-proclaimed cynic. And
I don't like that.
I'm sorry, an actual cynic. If you ask most people in his life, he would say that. But yeah, I just plan to share some ideas and go with that. And so the one that I want to talk about today is I'm going to share some information, then I'll just kind of let you go at it. And so I've been thinking about a lot how it feels like to me in Christianity, most people tend to read Jesus as theology.
Hold real quick. Should we explain what entangled is?
I did. We untangle Christianity from theology, religion.
Oh, you don't want to give them like the...
No, man.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
That's what we do.
Pick it back up. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Start back
all
up.
right, we roll with it. All right, so here's the stop. So here's the untangle. I've been thinking about how most people think about Christianity, and it feels to me that like they're always choosing the wrong perspective. And I was trying to figure out why they're doing that. And my example that I would give is most people tend to think of and read Jesus as theology instead of reading him as philosophy, right? And because if you read Jesus as philosophy, then when you think about philosophies, you don't ever hear commands, you hear instructions, right?
Okay.
And so when you do it that way, when you begin to approach scripture even and reading the Bible and all these other kinds of things, then you begin to hear Jesus as instructions versus commands. And if you think about that, the way that causes you to function in your Christian walk would be dramatically different if you saw what Jesus was teaching us as instructions versus commands. And so what I think is that people would be better served as hearing Jesus as instructions or as philosophy than as commands. Seeing Jesus as teaching precepts, as teaching principles that apply to both this world and the world beyond, right? And so I actually say, if you were to boil all of Jesus's philosophy down, right? All of Jesus' philosophy down, I would say that Jesus's philosophy can be summed up in how can I be the highest good to God, to myself, and to others. And if you think about it, that's neither works nor faith, right? Is it works? No. I said, how do you be the highest good? By definition, in order to be a thing, you're not working for it. You just are it, right?
All right.
So it's definitely not works, but it's also not faith alone, right? Because if I say, be the highest good to yourself and others, I don't know how you would be the highest good without doing anything.
Without showing it,
right?
yeah.
And so by nature, then it's neither works nor faith. It's something different. It's goodness, right? And my fear is that when I say that, then most people will somehow say, well, no, that can't be Jesus' central philosophy because we've been taught that I didn't say the word Jesus when I put out that philosophy, right? And so as a result, which often feels silly to me because essentially when we do that, what we're saying is we all recognize though that simply saying the name doesn't save you, right? but why do we make you have to say the name then, right? So that's number one. Number two, we know that Jesus actually told people they were saved before he died, right? In Luke 7:50, he says to the woman, your faith has saved you, right? He ain't died yet, right? He hasn't. I mean, just to be clear, right?
Okay.
And so, you know, we have all these reasons that the idea, but there will still be a people, right? I can go through example after example, reason after reason, right? But when it's all done, there'll be somebody who says, I don't care, man. I don't care about none of that. It's Jesus only. And I'll say, well, we know that, and you know, I'll give another example. And I'll say, well, we know that, like, to call a person's name is to call out a person's name is different to call upon than calling upon that person, right? Okay. Right. If I'm in a room somewhere and my wife's in the other room, right? And I just be like, man, Aisha, right? I've called out her name, but I didn't call her. You see what I'm saying? But if I wanted her, I would have to call her, right? But if I focus on just saying the name and then say, yeah, man, I said the name, then I didn't actually call out to the person. You see what I'm saying? So we know. So I'll give all those examples, right? But here's the deal. Okay. I understand. Yeah, I see you percolating already. No, because some people are gonna say, right? So ultimately they'll say, yeah, but you didn't say Jesus's name. I'm a Jesus name only person. And I would say, well, even you person who, like, I don't care about all of that. I'm a Jesus only. I'll say, even you have a gospel you believe that doesn't use Jesus's name. And it goes like this. Anyone who looks for God while believing he's good will be saved, because either they will find God or God will find them. So he'll send whoever they need or whatever it might be. And if you think about that, I just told you who's going to be saved, how they can do it, and I never said Jesus' name. Okay. Right? So even the person who's like, hey, I believe in Jesus only, I'm going to tell you, there's a gospel you believe in that doesn't use Jesus' name, and that's because we've been misunderstanding Jesus. We've been reading him as theology and commands instead of reading him as philosophy, right? Okay. And if you recognize believing on Jesus' name as philosophy, I think it fundamentally changes things. In fact, and I'm on a little rant, but I'm still looking now, yeah. But for me, one of the things that it changes, the things that we know about philosophies is, if you hear a philosophy even today, you don't feel like you have to get rid of the truth you already know to embrace that philosophy. What you begin to do is follow that philosophy until you find that you no longer need any of the other truths that you were using, right? Because it's encompassed in that philosophy. Okay. Right? So I believe the same thing as it relates to Jesus. All I want to do is get Jesus in the mix of people's philosophies. If I could get Jesus in the mix, I believe he will rise to the top, right? Because right? And so,
because I had questions, but go ahead.
Right, yeah, he'll rise to the top. And so in the meantime, what you do is you say, hey, I want to show you the philosophy of Jesus. I want to show you how your goal should be to be the highest good that you can be to God, to yourself, and to others. Luke 10:27, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, your strength, and your neighbor as yourself, right? So be the highest good that you can be to God, right? Because if you love someone, you want their highest good, right? So that's essentially it. So be the highest good you can for God, to yourself, and to others. And as you do that, right? As you do that, if you found truth other places, I can promise you it's probably encompassed in that same truth that I just gave you. So I'm just trying to get Jesus in the mix of whatever else you believe and let him rise to the top on his own.
Okay. Question.
Okay. All right.
If I heard you correctly, you insinuate that there's a lot of issues with people that are like more literal when it comes to following of Jesus, or just Jesus and not more theoretic.
Is what philosophical.
Philosophical. Yeah. I'm so sorry. Philosophical.
Right.
So tell me the dangers that you see with people being more literal when it comes to leaning on that name of Jesus versus just.
Well, I think it causes them to misunderstand lots of things, right? Like, and one of the biggest is if you focus on the name of Jesus instead of the person associated with Jesus, right? Going back to my example of calling my wife out, right? If you focus on that, then what it tends to allow you to do is have this kind of cognitive only salvation, right? As long as I believe when I go in my house. So, and this I would argue was the salvation of the slave owners, right? If you were a slave owner, just in honesty, I know that's if you were a slave owner, you needed to go out and beat a person and rape their women and separate their families or whatever, but you needed to come back inside and tell yourself you were doing fine. Then you can come back inside and tell yourself, oh, I believe in Jesus. You see what I'm saying? Because I said the name. I said the name before I went to bed. I said the name, right? And so as a result, you don't actually have to align yourself to Jesus. You don't have to follow Jesus. You don't have to do anything Jesus actually, his philosophy of life, right? Right. Jesus had a philosophy that governed the way he lived. And if you read him as philosophy, then when you go in, you have to be following that philosophy. But if you see it as just name, then you never have to follow the philosophy. You just literally have to say the name. And I would say, oh, you can't be a follower of Wes and just say my name, right? You can't just be like, I follow Wes and then not do any of the things that govern the way that I live my life, right? And so I think the fear, the danger is that we begin to create a Christianity where you can simply just say you believe a thing and not actually follow Jesus, if that makes sense.
Do you honestly believe that's where Christianity is today? Do you think that's what's being taught in church? As long as you proclaim the name of Jesus, you don't have to worry about anything else? Or do you think it's being interpreted the wrong way?
I think it's both, but I think so. I'll give you a story.
You think it's being taught that way in church?
I do. And here's an example.
Okay.
All right. So everybody has one. My shooting thing that hit me was Philando Castile. Right. So Philando Castile, because I don't know how you get shot in front of your daughter after you've told somebody there's a weapon in the car. I just don't even know how that happens. Right. So that happened, and I had a hard day at work. And I just had to go home. I wouldn't tell my boss, like, look, I'm having a hard day. I got to go home. My boss understood, right? He's like, I understand that you live in a world and that in this world, you have to be able to function, right? So I go home and I call the pastor of the church I'm attending. And I say to him, hey, man, are y'all going to say anything about this? And he says, we got together as a team. And decided we're just going to talk about the gospel, right? So by definition, he then said, oh, all we're going to do is just talk about Jesus. We're not going to talk about how Jesus plays a role in what's actually happening in the world and in your life. And I would argue, or I would propose, that is what we've done with a lot of our Christianity, is we've created a Christianity where we are literally saying, I don't really care about what's happening in the world and culture. All you need to care about is saying the name Jesus. And I'm saying, oh, no, that's a misunderstanding, right? Because even if you look at Jesus, right? If you look at Jesus alone, I mean, he spent a lot of time dealing with the world, how you should function in the world, how you should behave, all of that, right? So to call upon the name of Jesus is not simply to say the word Jesus. It's to call upon the person that the name represented. And I would say if that's the case, then when you call upon Jesus, that means that you are following his philosophy, not just simply saying, I believe that he was here, right?
So you're more so like, just to put it in more modern terms, you think more people are just watching the channel and they're not subscribing? So this is, I look at it like
okay,
this.
all right, I see what you're saying.
So like, a lot of people watch podcasts. Everybody has their favorite podcast.
Right.
Some people have a podcast that they listen to frequently. Okay. I often talk to people that never subscribe to the channel. They don't download the episodes.
Right. But they tell you that's their favorite.
They go to it, they watch it.
I got you.
Fan.
I got you.
Are you trying to say like, so if I'm just hearing you correct?
No. I think you are, because I actually just put out a video saying this, and I always caution people before I say it, because it's but I literally say, hey, listen, I'm a Christian. I love Jesus, man. I follow Jesus in all the ways. But I'm about to say a statement that scares most Christians, and that is, and so I ask before I do this, and I ask everybody, I say, so I ask that you don't hear me, you listen to me, right? Because if you hear with your ears, then you listen with your what? What would you say?
My mind.
Your mind. Okay, right? So I would say most people only hear what they think you're saying. So take a second and see if you can hear what I'm saying in a different way. Okay. All right. So here's what I say. I no longer worship Jesus. I follow him. I know.
Okay. Maybe I should have waited.
Yeah. Wait. I follow him.
Okay.
And for most people, they wouldn't be able to tell the difference, right? If you were looking from the outside. Yes, sir.
This is my way of.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Tell me that you got something to say.
Yes, because I do a very bad job of interrupting people.
Okay.
Is there a way to follow Jesus and not worship?
Yes.
Someone could say that sounds the same to me.
Yeah. And I would actually be okay with that, except that the primary difference between worship and following is what you do with various parts of Jesus's life, right? So if you are a worshiper, right, then when Jesus turns water into wine, you just think, yo, that's dope, man. That shows he was God in the flesh. That's amazing. Him. Yeah. That's cool. But that ain't got nothing to do with you, right? You ain't got to do nothing. Jesus turned water to wine. That's on him, man. That's great, right? But if you're a follower, then you say everything Jesus did, I need to be doing or a version of it. So when I hear Jesus turn water to wine, I think, why did he do that? Well, people was having a good time at a party, and the party was about to end. So Jesus was like, oh, I want y'all to keep the party going. Well, Wes Parham cannot turn water to wine yet. I'm working on it, but I can't yet, right?
I don't like this correlation.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Well, I know. I'm just saying. I can't, right?
Right.
I can't. I would love to, right? I'd love to be able to move in that, but I'm not there yet, right? But you know what I can do? If a party's about to end, I can DoorDash some food. Make the party keep going, right? Because as a follower, there is nothing Jesus does that I don't need to try to mimic. Whereas if you're a worshiper, there are whole parts of Jesus' life you don't have to do anything to. You don't have to aspire to. Jesus gets transfigured on the mountain. You ain't got to do nothing about that. Jesus heals the sick. You ain't got to do nothing about that. For me, I literally have to look at every verse, every time Jesus talks, every time he moves, every time he functions, every time. And if you see me read my Bible, I read it so slow because everything Jesus does, I have to figure out what's my parallel. What's my parallel? What I can do as a result of that. And for me, that's where I say, oh, yeah, I think that following and worshiping will look similar, but there is a distinct difference because in one of them, you actually have to do something.
Right.
In the other one, you can just watch Jesus.
So I would say then, because what you just described in your example of following Jesus, I would actually consider that a form of worship. So if I'm hearing you, I think you're saying that what you guys are calling, when I say you guys, I'm saying Christians, what Christians are calling worship, y'all really are, that's not worship, that's admiration. And what we need to do is actually use the actual word worship and actually put it in its right context and turn that into what it looks like in the physical as actually following him.
Sure.
So again, whose fault is that? Is that like
I don't think it's anybody's necessary fault. I think it's the history. Well, I think it's lots of people's fault.
I'm about to say, because I got a laundry list of some culprits that I can probably say.
Yeah, I think it's lots of people's fault, but I think if we start focusing on whose fault it is and miss the point that it needs to change, then we won't change, right? So I think a lot of times people want to do that. They want to be like, well, why do we think this and all that? And I'm like, and that's true, right? And sometimes you want to have that information, but if you stop there, then you miss the point, right? You miss the whole point. And so for me, it's like, yeah, I would easily tell you, oh man, that had to be the way our theology in the Western world evolved in order for us to deal with the cognitive dissonance of being able to treat people a certain way and still want to call yourself righteous in God's eyes, right? So you had to develop a theology where there are just parts of Jesus's life that you ain't got to do nothing about so that you can just be like, yeah, I still believe in him. I believe he turned water to wine, right? You need to be able to do that if you can still go outside and abuse people the way you wanted to, or conquer other civilizations, or force ideas on them, or force, in order for you to be able to do that and deal with the cognitive dissonance that comes with that, you had to say, oh, we're going to just focus on it as, belief instead of as ethic. Whereas that's what I think is cool about Jesus's philosophy, is it's neither and both at the same time, right? It is being the highest good that you can for God, for yourself, and for others. And so in that sense, it is faith, because you are being, right?
Right.
But in that sense, it's also works, because in order for you to be that highest good, you have to walk something out. But in truth, if you say, well, then that's works, I'll be like, no, it's not that. And you'd be like, well, then it's faith. I'd be like, no, it's not that. It's both, right? And I would argue it's goodness, right? That's what I would argue Jesus' philosophy should be called, the philosophy of goodness, if you want to call it, right? Right, but the idea is, hey, be the highest good you can be. And if we start reading Jesus as that, right, I think that would fundamentally change the way that we think about Christianity in a lot of different ways.
All right, let's get messy now.
Okay, all right, messy. All right.
So you're saying,
all right, where we going?
Let's just go into it, because it's a lot of insinuation that I'm picking up, and it could be just because I feel like arguing.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
But it's one of those things. Like, it seems like you're just. What I hear you saying is that Christians are doing it wrong, and we have been doing it wrong for quite some time. And then if I actually were to pay more attention to what you're trying to say. I think you're telling us that we're not Christian.
Yeah. I don't think I'm saying any of those things and all of those things. Right?
I feel like, yeah. All I hear is that I do this wrong, I call on Jesus the wrong way.
Well, to be clear, that's what we believe anyway, right? So even if you put Christianity in its most traditional sense, right? Okay. All of the scholars, all of the seminaries, everybody would tell you there's processes then, right? There is justification, then there's sanctification, and then there's glorification, right? And so justification is when you're saved, but sanctification is when you begin to recognize that you are not doing things right, and you continue to keep trying to get better at doing things until glorification comes, right? So I am saying that, right? I am saying that during our sanctification process, that we have done some things wrong, right? And even some things that we thought we were getting right? And do I believe that I've got them all right? No, not necessarily. Okay. I think we'll find those in glorification. But what I will say is that when you begin to look at how Jesus described how he wanted us to live, right? Life, I want you to have life more abundantly, right? If you begin to look, my peace I give to you, joy I give to you, right? My burden is easy, my yoke is light, right? You look at how Jesus wanted us to live. And then you look at how it feels like our Christianity often feels. And I would argue or propose that often those two feel like they're in conflict, right? I was talking with a Christian who had been saved for 40 years. Okay. And this Christian said to me, man, there's not a person in my life, not one in my life, who would say a bad word about me.
Time out. Now I'm just going to start poking holes.
Okay, all right, poke the holes, man. I want to hear them.
Why is that such a... Because I feel like Christians do that a lot, too.
What?
I've been saved for such and such. Why does that matter?
Well, I think...
Because you just used that to justify this person, too.
Well, no, I was about to explain a different scenario, right? They were saying, I've done it for this long, right?
Okay.
And they were saying, and over the course of me doing it, because of the way I've chosen to live my life, there's not a person who would speak an ill word about me, right?
Okay.
And that's what they were saying. And I said to them, hey, that's amazing. You should feel very proud of that. And they said, oh, I can't feel proud of that because that would be pride. And I thought, that feels like a heavy burden, right? To live a certain way for 40 years, to know that because you've done it, you have really made an amazing impact on the lives of people and people who know you and all of that, right? But to say, but I can't feel good about it at all, right? That feels...
I see so much wrong with all of that.
Okay, tell me what's wrong with it.
I don't, and this this is just me.
Uh-huh.
I'm not speaking for nobody.
Okay, yeah.
I just want to make sure I put that little part out
Put
there.
that out there. All right.
Because sometimes I just get to talking, and it feels like I'm trying to speak for somebody, but I'm not.
Okay.
I feel like the fact that, like, if we were to, for me, if I looked at it in its purest form, in terms of what I do for God, to glorify God, the fact that I'm tracking a bunch of that stuff makes me feel weird. Like, I don't think it would matter if I was saved for a day or for 40 years. If I'm a true follower of Christ, that's all I'm doing. I'm just following him. And then to add on to that, the fact that, like, I could say, yeah, nobody could have something bad to say about me. Like, I don't see how all that correlates with following God, because if the focus is to follow him, right? That's what I'm going to do. It's not say follow him and get your likes up.
Right. Well, I think twofold, right?
Okay, because I can hold on real quick, because I can easily say, and I think you can have some examples as well, that I know some people that claim to follow Jesus for a mighty long time.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why it's important that you talk about people not being able to speak badly about you, right? Because what you're saying there.
Why does that matter if someone were to say something bad about you?
Well, I'm about to tell you why. Because remember, Jesus' central philosophy, right? Highest good of God, yourself, and others, right? So if you're doing the highest good you can among others, then the fruit of that should be that people have that reputation for you. You are the type of person who is always fighting for my highest good.
Right.
So in that sense, I would say it's very hard to feel like you're actually a follower of Jesus if you can't look and see the fruit of the work of following Jesus in the world around you, right? And that's what I think, that it goes back to my point, right? So in our Western world, we do this thing where spiritual things are spiritual, physical things are physical, soul things are soul, right?
Okay.
Right, mind, will, emotion, soul, right? And those three things are separate. So if you're doing a spiritual thing, then you are not doing a physical thing, right? Or in the sense of, right, if you ask most Christians, hey, what do you do to spiritually grow? If they don't say prayer, reading the Bible, going to church, we're going to be like, all right, sinner, where you at? I mean, you see what I'm saying? But I believe it was Howard Thurman, the theologian, who said, they asked him that question. He said, I go outside and I try to hear the grass grow. Right? For him, spiritual is not only doing sacred acts. It's recognizing that the spiritual is inherently tied to the physical. Grass growing represents God's work here on the earth. What if I could attune myself so much to hear the work that God is even doing with grass? And so in that sense, then he sees himself as more this holistic being, right? We normally describe spirit, soul, and body as three separate circles, but I think it's better understood, and I think those in antiquities and ancient writers and everybody better understood the connection as like a tangled ball of yarn, right? So if you pull on the soul, the whole ball moves, right? And if you pull on the spirit, the whole ball moves, right? And so for me, if you are truly following Jesus, like you say, right, then it's going to have impacts on your soul, your spirit, and your body, right? You should be able to see fruit in all three levels, right? Instead of just one. And so I think when people say, I've been following Christ for 40 years, what I hope they're saying is, and as a result of that, my following has manifested fruit in both my spiritual life, which you can't see, in my thoughts, my mind's will, and emotions, which you might be able to see, right? If you could see manifested, but also in my interactions with other people, right? And so my highest good, my desire to see the highest good for God, for myself, and for others has actually manifested in good for God, myself, and others. And so that's where I think, no, you don't use that to keep track, but you should expect it as a fruit. And I think you can't do one without the other, right? You can't be like, I'm following Jesus, but I don't care how it impacts anybody else. I'm like, well, you ain't doing it.
I didn't say that.
I know that's yeah. Okay. I mean, but I think that when you make that distinction, right? When we separate and say, well, why should we care about the physical part if we're caring about the spiritual part? And I'm like, oh, it's all because it's all the same.
Because it all kind of
it all links together.
I just think that I don't like the way that it's presented then, because I feel like it's presented as like an accolade and stuff like that. Not to say that you shouldn't have any when following Jesus, but I think we make that the focus. And I think, to go back to what you were saying, not to say that I see something wrong with how it's done in modern church. I just feel like, I just feel like the focus can be somewhere different, because I feel like the difference between what you're describing and what's being done in the church today is the focus. I think the focus has just shifted, and I think the more we go along without being able to like call each other out on some of these things, is the reason why we see what we see today. Because I feel like, honestly, they truly do believe, and I'm not the one to say that what they believe isn't real, but like I feel like how they are doing church today, they can say with a clear mind and a clear heart that they're doing it right. Well, so who am I to say that, like, oh, no.
Well, I think that goes back to my original point, right? Is if you see Jesus as philosophy, right? Because that's how that's
the flip.
That's how readers, right? That's how listeners back then. You got to think about it. They didn't have the Bible to go back and compare scriptures and be like, oh, look, no, Paul was saying this, so it brings extra clarity to what Jesus is saying. They didn't have that, right? So when Jesus gets up and he's like, yo, this is what it's like. The kingdom of God is like a woman who's lost a coin and she kept searching for it, right? They wouldn't have been like, oh, that parallels with the story that we find in the Epistle of Hebrews. They wouldn't have done that. They would have literally been like, hey, man, that's an interesting way to think about the kingdom of God, right? That's an interesting philosophy. Tell us more, right? And he'd be like, all right, yeah, she would search the whole house. You see what I'm saying? Like the idea. And so when you think of Jesus in that way, right? So then you say, I followed Jesus for 30 years. Then the question is, can you look back and say, oh, I lived this philosophy that he taught for the past 30 years? Or are you looking back and just saying, 30 years ago, I said his name, and ever since that, I've been good, right? Like, that's different, right? Okay. I'm saying that's calling on the name, not calling on the person. And so that's what I would say. I would say if you're using it as a way to mark this saying of the name, right, and then using that as an outcloak, then I'd get where you're at. I'm like, bro, that don't mean nothing to me. That doesn't mean anything. Yeah, because but if I look at your life and it doesn't reflect Jesus' philosophy for the past 40 years, then I'm like, oh, bro, I don't know what you did, but you ain't been following Jesus for 40 years. I mean, you see what I'm saying? Like, in all honesty, right? That's
into the weeds about doing that.
I know, but that's the truth, right? I think sometimes we feel like the people of antiquities thought different than us, so thus they were different than us, and that's different, right? And so they may have thought different than us, but they're not necessarily different from us in the sense that if someone was to say to me right now, my kids are the best example, right? I'm raising them. If they say, I've been following the philosophies Dad has been teaching me, I've been following the wisdom he's been giving me, I've been following the instruction he's been giving me for the past, my oldest is going to be 14, past 14 years, right?
Right.
Then I would say, oh, then I should be able to look back over your 14 years and it should look a lot like the way that I choose to live now.
But that leaves so much up to speculation, because who is that person to say that, like, oh, yeah, you did that right, versus, no, you did that wrong?
Well, in this case, the person is Jesus. So for me, he gets to say that, right?
He gets to say that,
I think
right?
He gets to say that, yeah.
He gets to say that. Mm-hmm. But what I find is that there are a lot of individuals who want to tell me that, like, yeah, you may have been following him for 40 years, but I can't see it. Does that mean the 40 years of the work that I feel like I've been doing has been done in vain, or it doesn't matter? Or
no, I think it's both, right? Is that should be an opportunity for you to examine yourself and see if you're in the faith. That's what Scripture tells us to do, right? So if somebody says, yo, Wes, you've been claiming to follow Jesus, and I've really been looking at Jesus lately, Wes. I've been really studying him. Right? Because that's the other part, right?
Yeah, because
in order for you to be able to tell me that I'm not following the philosophy, then I have to feel like you've taken the time to really learn the philosophy, right? So, but if someone says, hey, man, I've been really reading Jesus, I've been going through, man, and I'm looking, and it don't look like you and him got the same approach to life, and you've been claiming that for 40 years, for me, I should be able to say, oh, well, let's sit down and dialogue. Tell me what you saw, right? Because maybe that's true, or maybe there's something you're not understanding, right? One of the two, right? Maybe there's something I'm not understanding.
I don't like that.
Why not?
I don't like it. And
Why
this is
not?
maybe just that left field approach. I just feel like the only person that could qualify my relationship with God or my walk with God, like you said, would be him. I feel like it's like contradicting to be able to sit there and analyze a person and tell them, no, you didn't do that right. Or no, you could have did this better. Because who are you? This is my walk. This is my walk. And this doesn't have nothing to do with you. This is what I'm finding in a lot of churches.
I'm listening. Yeah,
It's kind of like I'm having these group of people telling me that, no, I'm doing this wrong. I need to be doing it. Like, and then like me, because even if there's some truth in that, right?
Yeah.
I'm not like, I don't know. It's like instead of me taking that in, letting it resonate with my soul, making adjustments, it's kind of like, oh, well, who are you? Right. Mr. Pastor who used to deal drugs and now is a Bible thumper. Like, who is you?
But I'm saying none of that should matter if it goes back to your original point, right? Who you're following, so there's two thoughts I would have.
Okay.
Number one is I don't think we get to do that, or at least I don't.
Okay.
Because my understanding of Jesus's philosophy is he made it very clear, they shall know you by your fruits and the way you love one another, right? So for me,
who's they?
The world.
Okay.
That's what Jesus was talking about, right? So I do think people should be able to look at me and be like, man, you are either following that or you're not, right?
But if I'm not a believer,
but
if I'm not a believer,
and
who am I to say?
Oh, yeah. If you're not a believer, that's fine, right? If you're not a believer,
so we're not even.
Yeah, I'm not listening to you because you haven't even studied the philosophy, right? You haven't studied the philosophy, so you don't really know, right? We love to. I talked about this last night.
But who's to say who's actually studied and who hasn't? Because why should I take a pastor's word for it versus the person who doesn't believe at all? Because I don't know what that pastor does in their personal time.
Well,
they could be as bad as the person who doesn't believe. All I know.
However, that doesn't matter for what they've studied in the philosophy. So, for instance, right, like perfect example.
Okay.
Is that's why I think we have to see it as philosophy, right? So, if I'm a student in class, right, and in the class we're learning budgeting.
Okay.
Right? And the person comes to me and they're like, hey, man, you're not putting this budgeting right. This is how it's supposed to be working. You should have 40% this allocated for this, 30% allocated for that, whatever it might be. Right?
If you believe in that philosophy of budgeting.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And I'm saying, I follow this philosophy of budgeting, right? And this person says, oh, yeah. Well, I'm instructing you in this philosophy of budgeting, right? Because I've studied this philosophy of budgeting.
Okay.
Then I say, oh, okay. Well, the thing about philosophy is the other thing to understand is to be clear, it's very hard to wholesale accept an entire philosophy, right? That's why I like seeing it that way, right? Because it's very hard to accept if you approach Jesus as philosophy, then I can boil it down to what he said, Luke 10:27, right, as the central premise, right? But to be clear, the beauty of philosophies is that they're designed for muddy places, right? They're designed where things aren't clear, right?
Where nothing exists.
We're in the internet, right?
Right.
If you read Jesus as commands, he don't command nothing about the internet.
Right.
Right. He don't say nothing about the internet.
Right.
You know what I mean? But if you read him as instructions in a philosophy, principles of a philosophy, ethics of a philosophy, then you say, oh man, he didn't talk about the internet, but he did give me some principles that govern how I interact with people while I'm here on the internet.
Right.
Right.
No, that part I do.
And so that's why I'm like, oh, and so in that sense, if someone comes along and they say, hey, I've been studying Jesus's philosophy too, they might be able to point out a part to me. That's why I don't get mad.
Here we go.
They might be able to point out a part to me in their study that I have not got to yet.
Yeah.
Right.
Or didn't look at.
Right.
In that way.
Right. And that's why it becomes important for me to then say, oh, what's the central premise?
Right.
Right. That's why I can line whatever you might do up against this premise. But if you come and you say, hey, man, you haven't been following Jesus in this way, and I'll be like, oh, tell me what you mean, right? Because at that point, now we can say, is what you're saying line up with the central premise, right? Or I can say, oh, well, you're misunderstanding that part because if you line it up with the central premise. But in either way, I might say, oh, you're right. I have not.
Okay.
Or I would say, oh, one of us are misunderstanding because we know this is the central premise. And that's where I think seeing Jesus as philosophy is cooler.
Yeah.
Because that, and also understanding that's how people saw him. Justin Martyr, one of considered this amazing writer in the first century, theologian study, he would tell you his entire journey when he wrote it. His entire journey to finding Jesus went through philosophy. He was a Stoic, and he went through all of these different philosophies, right? He was a Platonist. He went through all these different philosophies, and when he got to Jesus, he eventually got killed because he wouldn't renounce Jesus. But he got to Jesus because he bumped into it as a philosophy. Now, the beauty of that is when you see Jesus as a philosophy, Justin Martyr didn't get rid of all the other stuff he knew before.
Right.
He figured out how that stuff aligned with the philosophy of Jesus.
Can I throw something out to you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I love philosophy too. Because I think that's and I love the approach of seeing Jesus as like
a philosopher.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Because like, even if, is there a way, this is a multi-part question. Is there a way that we can have the same, like foundation, same general idea, but have different philosophies of how we interpret said idea? And can we both coexist? Because one thing I find in today's church is like, this is our center point. This is how we interpret it. Anybody else, y'all not gang.
Yeah.
All right?
Now, that's true. And it's very true. And that's why I think it goes back, right? If you see it as theology, then these are the rules. These are the rules. And if you don't fit the rules, you ain't gang.
You don't think there's rules to certain philosophies?
Yeah, I do.
And because they have those rules, would you consider them to be?
But I think it's if you study philosophy, I think it's very hard to classify a thing as a rule.
Okay.
You might classify it as a principle. You might classify it as instruction, right?
Tell me the difference now.
Well,
this is just me just doing this.
Well, I know, and it's a perfect example because I love it, right? So if you're getting ready to make something, right? I'm sitting down to make something. If you see a bunch of commands, you're going to have a hard time, right?
True.
But if you see instructions.
What's the difference, sir?
Well,
what's a command versus an instruction?
It's how you see it, right?
Interpretation, right?
Right? It's how you...
Because I can take that same list of instructions like, screw it with the screwdriver. What if I want to do it with a hammer?
But see, so for me, it shifts in so many different ways, right? Okay. So if I'm putting a table together,
right,
and I get to the next step, and I see it as a command, then I'm like, I am about to get this leg on this table no matter how I got to do it. And I'll hammer and I'll damage other parts if I need to get it in there, right? But if I see it as instructions, then I say, oh man, this is what the table's supposed to look like when it's done.
Says the manufacturer.
Says the person who created it, right? And decided what it was supposed to be used for. This person said, this is what it looks like when it's done. And this is how you attach that part to it. Then I would say, oh, well, if I see commands, it'll be like, well, go get a 4-inch screwdriver with it. But if I see principles, then I say, oh,
let's attach the leg.
Let's get the leg attached, right? I don't have that. You see what I'm saying? It changes.
It takes pressure.
Yeah.
It takes pressure off of me. And then also it gives me free range.
It does.
But it can get dangerous.
What you mean?
So using your analogy of the table, right?
Right. Yeah.
This is what it's supposed to look like when it's done.
Right.
Like, why can't that be like, so when it's done, 4 legs need to be on this tabletop.
Right.
So
because it's not what it looks like when it's done. It's what it is when it's done. See, the manufacturer is not. They give you a picture, and that's where we make a mistake.
Okay.
They give us a picture
of what
it looks like. And if all you're trying to get to is what it looks like when it's done, then all you're trying to do is make the table look like this.
I think you.
But for me, what I'm trying to do is build a table so I can set stuff. You see what I'm saying? So the instructions teach me how to make it work in the way it was supposed to, whereas commands make me get it to look how it's supposed to look. And I want it to be what it's supposed to be, not look how it's supposed to look. And that goes all the way back to what we keep talking about around Jesus' philosophy.
Right.
It was be the highest good, not work it, not look it, right? You have to be it. I don't want the table to look like a table. I want to be able to sit down at the table.
Functionality.
Yes,
of a
I want it
table
to
when
be
it's
a table, right?
I think we stumbled into something.
Okay, all right. Tell me what we stumbled
Because
into.
I don't want to get on the same side of you. I'm just going to be honest.
Okay,
with you.
all
But
right.
if we end up on the same side, I'm totally okay.
Okay,
with it.
all right.
So are you trying to say that in terms of like being a follower of Christ, we have gotten to the point, and when I say we, I say the church.
We as a Christianity, yeah.
We as a religion, or however you want to categorize it.
Yeah.
We as a church.
I think you about to summarize it. Let's hear it. I think you about to drop it.
Have
Let's
we
hear
got it? No. Just tell me if I'm tracking.
No, I
Because
think,
you can pick this
I
up.
think you tracking because
You
I
can
think
you can pick this ball up and
I
run with
think
it
you
if you
about to
want
drop a bomb right here. Drop
Are
it.
you
Here we
saying
go.
that in
Here we go.
terms of when it comes to being a follower of Christ, the Christianity, the church has gotten to a point where it's like, now you just need to look like a Christian. Let's not worry about the functionality of it. When a Christian looks like this,
A Christian looks like this.
woo, 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 they go to church. They pay their tithes.
Yep.
They make sure the pastor gets their anniversary dinner.
Yeah.
We make sure the pastor eats first. Like, that's what it looks like to be a Christian. What you're saying is that, like, no, because, like, you
Yeah.
can do all that, but you're
Yeah.
still not functioning. Because, like you said, like,
and that breaks my heart, bro, because that's the truth, right? That's really the truth, right? That's what it goes back to all the time. And I think I had said this to you before, and I say it all the time, is that the gospel, if you look at what Jesus said, the gospel is supposed to be good news.
good news.
It's good news, right? Not truth alone, good news.
Good news.
But if we just focus on the truth, right, without recognizing that it's also good news, then what we want to do is just make sure it looks like truth, not how you use it. And yes, that breaks my heart, because when you do it that way, then even if you take that approach now and put it on you as a Christian, and you say, all right, what I'm trying to do is make sure I look like a Christian to the world.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? And when you do that, you go out and all you see is a bunch of commands. Jesus said, don't lie, better not lie. Jesus said, don't do this, right? Because what you want to do is look like a Christian to people.
Right.
But when you say, I'm not trying to look like a Christian, I'm trying to be one.
So I'm not going to lie.
Right. I'm just
So
not
I'm
going to
gonna
lie.
steal. So I'm
Right,
not
yeah.
gonna
I'm just
kill.
not going to do
That's what you're
those
saying.
things because I want to live the life the way Jesus told me to live it, right? I want to live I believe that Jesus was the ideal life, right? That's what I believe. I hope that's what we all believe as Christians, right?
Right.
Jesus lived, the ideal life. And we want to live that life, and he gave us instructions to do that. But we're busy trying to look like we're living the life.
Instead of walking.
And so we see commands instead of instructions. And that's what happens when you read Jesus as theology instead of philosophy, right?
So I can understand the mess.
Yeah.
Now, so now, no pun intended. How do we start to untangle this mess?
Yeah. I think that in itself is a central idea, right? Is when we start to say, all right, then when I examine myself, right? When I go into my quiet time, when I do all of that, whenever I do that, I ask myself, am I following the philosophy of Jesus, right? And the beauty of Jesus' philosophy is that the things Jesus taught, he taught them in such a way that they work here on earth and spiritually. You see what I'm saying? We act like we only hear them spiritually, right? But Jesus, when you see it as a philosophy, then when Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like this, then you say, oh, but Jesus believed the kingdom of heaven was both in heaven and here at the same time, right? Because he would say, the kingdom of heaven has come to you. It's here. It's here right now. But you will also go to the kingdom of heaven. It's like this, right? And so you begin to live and follow Jesus differently because you begin to say, how do I make the kingdom of heaven in all levels, not just one, right? Not just one. And so now, then when I approach Jesus, when I approach him as philosophy, I can say to myself, man, what I want to do is not look like this thing, be this thing. And when I do that, it changes a lot of stuff, right? Simple things. Should you lie? No. The instructions say don't lie, right? As a philosophy, though, when you think of it as a philosophy, then that changes things, right? If it's a command, you don't lie, right? But
like no
but here, and this is where I think is real cool. So I'm a teacher, right? You're a teacher, we're a teacher. We both work at a place where we teach kids, right?
Yes.
So I'm a teacher by nature, and so spiritual gift teacher, all of it, right? If you wouldn't throw teacher, I love it. I'm teacher, right?
Right.
So at home, I teach my kids a lot, right? But as a teacher, one of the things I've noticed is I cannot, even now, think of a bit of wisdom to give to my kid that applies in every situation, no matter what, right? Let's take lying. I don't want my kids to lie. I want them to be honest kids. I want them to grow up to be honest people, right?
Right.
But if we leave here right now and there's a dude outside and he's like, I'm shooting anybody with the last name Parham, I'm going to turn to my daughter. I'm going to say, lie. Your last name ain't Parham, right? Because the principle is be a good person, be an honest person. The command is don't you lie, right? So at that point, you got to go out there and be like, my name is Parham, right? Like that seems silly. No, right? And then you would say, Wes, did you just tell people to lie? And I say, no, I told them to be honest and do not lie, which is what scripture tells us. Right. However, I will tell you that Rahab lied in the Bible and it was considered a righteous lie and to her credit, right? And so in that sense, I'm telling you to do what the Bible said do. Okay. And that is be honest. Be an honest person.
Right.
Do not lie, but recognize that is a principle and not a command.
How would you convey that to somebody that was just, before we wrap this all up, because I love practical application.
Right.
Because we've arrived at a point where, not to say that we found the issues plaguing the church,
but I think that we might have hit some.
We've been able to stumble across some ways that we can improve as a church. All right. So in that vein, in that same vein, how do I take that same philosophy and share that with somebody that might have something that's contradicting that? Like, how do I explain that to somebody that takes the Bible so literal? Like, no, God should never to lie. So even in that situation, what you just say, you're supposed to go outside, tell them your name, take that shot to the face, and then let that be it.
Yeah. And I think that's the part, right? There is no easy way, right? And I think that's what we've also tried to do in our Western world is like, all right, let's make things easy, right? But if you think about it, Jesus lived with people for 3 years to make sure they got it, right? They got to see him in various scenarios. They got to do, so the idea that I would just be able to go out there and be like, all right, listen, but here's where I'm starting.
Right.
Hey, you recognize that everybody who would have been hearing Jesus at the time would have been hearing him as philosophy. That's step one, right? They'd be like, wait, what do you mean? Well, there was no scripture, there was no seminaries, things like that. So even though Jesus was pulling from wisdom,
I'm not gonna lie to
you. Right, I know.
It sounded blasphemous at first. Thank you for clearing that up.
Right, but we recognize that even though Jesus was pulling from Old Testament scripture and Proverbs and things like that, for them, he was adding a philosophy to those things. That's how they would have heard it.
Right.
And then what's really more interesting is you have to think that the writers of the Gospels in particular were following the same tradition that they would have seen from philosophers, right? Perfect one we all know is, of course, Plato and Socrates, right? Yeah. Socrates wrote nothing down at all. But everything you think you know about Socrates, Plato told you what he said.
Right.
Jesus wrote nothing down at all. But everything you know about Jesus, the disciples told you, right? They were following the same tradition as philosophy. So when they were writing, they were doing the same thing. And so we have to be able to reframe and say, okay, the people hearing Jesus would have saw him as philosophy. The writers of the Gospels would have been following the philosophical tradition. So then what they were teaching us was Jesus's philosophies, not Jesus's rules.
Okay. I see what you're saying. So you're saying if you can just take a moment to open your mind to the point, to the idea of, hey, if y'all stop being so literal and just open your mind up to to interpret the Bible in this way, do you feel like
not even interpret, just see,
okay.
Right? Because you know, we'll have to save this one for another one. But when you say interpret and all that, what people would love to do just because of the language, it's a pregnant term.
Right.
They love to be like, that brother don't believe in the inerrancy of Scripture, the accuracy of Scripture. And I'm like, no, I believe in all of that.
Right.
Right. But I believe we have to see the book for what it was instead of what we think it is now. Right. And so for what it was at the time, people would have known they were following the tradition of philosophy. And I'm saying, that's all I'm trying to get you started to do, right?
Like that's the first step.
Right, yeah. If you can begin to see it as this was Jesus's philosophy for leading life, it makes so many things so much easier, right? Like then you recognize everything you read has to be in alignment with Jesus's philosophy about life. So then you get to questionable passages where Jesus talks about divorce. And he's like, they like, Jesus, when should we get divorced? And if you read it as a command, Jesus is like, you don't get divorced unless it's adultery, right? And so you had to believe Jesus, who we believe, saw the future, knew everything, right? You have to believe Jesus then. After somebody asked him when I should divorce, he looked into the future. He saw men abusing children. He saw women getting beat up. He saw murder attempts, all of that. He was like, yo, they didn't cheat though, so you good, right? Like that sounds ridiculous for Jesus.
Okay.
Right? Who says love, you know what I mean?
Right.
But when you recognize, oh, wait, whatever Jesus was saying has to be in alignment with his philosophy, then when you hear that verse, you now hear Jesus say, you don't hear him say, you got to stay in. You hear him be like, well, man, you really should try to stay in your marriage as much as possible. I mean, if you were going to choose one, adultery maybe, but like really try to stay in the marriage, right? And in that case, you didn't get a command, but you got a lot of instructions.
I like that concept, like in terms of saying like taking it literal and be like, oh no, it's just adultery. Like if I looked at it in a philosophy aspect, I could say like, oh, when it's something bad like adultery.
Right, exactly.
It's like, yeah. So like, no, it may not be adultery, but
with something
he's trying
like
to kill
that.
you.
He's
Like,
trying to kill you. Yeah, you should get up out of here. Yeah, exactly.
I see that part.
Yeah.
I'm interested more now to have more conversations like this because if that's the premise, I am interested to see where this goes.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. Thanks. So that's what I've been thinking about, and so I'll once again say thanks for joining me on our first live. This is our first live Untangled. So this was huge for me.
Yeah, and it was an unpaid episode too. I want to make sure we put that out there. I was not paid to come here.
Oh, that's true.
I would like to be paid.
I also was not paid.
Okay, cool.
Okay, yeah. So.
Thank you, Dr. Chris. I appreciate you, bro.
Man. Thanks for doing this. This was fun.
Man. This was fun.
Yeah.
I'll have more tools to poke holes in the boat next time. I promise. But I started off trying to figure out where you were going. I can honestly say that I'm at a point now where you have my attention.
Okay.
All right.
That's what I want to be.
Thank you, sir.